I had a theory about the sort of songs that would win the Eurovision Song Contest, and in order to put it to the test, I looked at 25 years of past winners to see if we could get any insight into what might happen in the future. What did I find? Well, some kind of surprising outliers. If you want to know what I'm talking about, get in here, let's take a look at what can win the Eurovision Song Contest. My name is Scott, I am an Australian and a Canadian and a Eurovision fan and also a TV professional. And boy oh boy do I like making spreadsheets and also the Eurovision Song Contest. I'll be upfront with you. This is what I thought. I thought that in order to win the Eurovision Song Contest, a song needs to build. It's not always been the case, I for sure know that, but more recently I had this idea that the songs that tend to win have to start somewhere and take us very far from where we began. To test out my hypothesis, I went all the way back to the year 2000 and every winner in every year since to rate them out of 5 for what I considered the build. Straight off the top, art is subjective. There's a very good chance that if you were to look at these songs and think about what you consider to be a build, you might come up with some very different numbers to what I got. But generally, when I talk about a build in a song, I'm talking about the difference in the dynamic range. What that means is, do we go from quiet to loud? Do we go from a small voice to a big belting voice? Do we start in one key or type of sound and then progress onwards to bigger and better things as the song goes on? Another element is the backing track, the musicality of the song. Do we start with one instrument and then end up with a full orchestra? That's definitely a build over time. I looked at all of these factors, as well as the most important one, which as always is just vibes, and I graded each of the last 25 years of songs on their build, and this is the graph that I made. As you can see, I think that songs are getting more buildy over time, but I was only about 2 or 3 years into rating songs where I realized I was missing half the story here. Because while I was focusing on the quality of the song, Eurovision is a visual competition just as much as it is a song contest. With that in mind, I jumped all the way back to 2000, started over, and also assigned every song a score out of 5 depending on the build in their staging. I got a second graph, it looked like this, and then I thought there's no use talking about one versus the other, and I put both of them together and made this monster. And this is what we're going to be talking about in the video today. Now, I wish I had time to talk about each of these 25 songs individually, and who knows, maybe one day I'll do just that. But for today, I want to focus on the beginning of this graph, the end of the graph, and then we'll pick a few in the middle that I thought were really interesting for one reason or another. Basically, every 0 or 5 in this graph we'll take a little pit stop at. So let's start at the very beginning and talk about the song that won the year 2000, the Olsen Brothers with Fly on the Wings of Love. Full disclosure, I love this song. This is a great song. I love it because it is not overly huge and overly dramatic. You can see I scored the song's build at a 2 out of 5. I think that's about right. Fly on the Wings of Love starts pretty much in the same place that it ends. We do, however, get a few memorable moments sonically throughout the performance. There is, of course, the chorus at the end, which uses the vocoder, and that's, yeah, we're branching out, we're going somewhere throughout the song. So it gets a build, but not a particularly grandiose one. Staging-wise, however, I find this to be completely flat, and stagings back in the day were far more like this staging. It looks great, there's space imagery behind them, the guys come out onto stage, they play their guitars, they're the same at the beginning of the song as they are at the end. And that's why it got a 0 out of 5 for the build score there. If you look at 2001 with the song Everybody, it's kind of a similar story. It does have a little bit of a build though. It starts with Dave and Tanel, the two male vocalists, kind of hyping one another up, and then as the song progresses, they encourage one another, they sing one after the other, but there is a moment there where they are singing together, and that's movement, that's growth, so that's a little bit of a build. But sonically, the energy level we start with is the energy level at the end of the song. I don't really find it goes anywhere. Staging-wise, they're moving, they're dancing at the beginning, they're moving, they're dancing at the end. It's the same throughout. Not a bad thing. And that's actually really important to talk about as well. Having a 0 out of 5 is not a bad thing. Having a 5 out of 5 is not necessarily a good thing. All we're doing here is assigning these numbers to try and differentiate different acts. This is not a value judgment at all, and to be honest, going back to the graph, a whole bunch of winners have numbers that are somewhere in the middle. But we'll circle back to that idea at the end. Another really interesting year to look at is 2002 and Marie N with I Wanna. This is a song that starts and ends with the same level of sonic intensity, but the staging pulls a little trick on you. Marie is dressed up very masculinely, she's dancing with a feminine dancer, and then about halfway through the song, the backing dancers remove her jacket. Ooh, a costume reveal, we think. Not a very good one. But then there's a second costume reveal, and visually we end up in a very different place than where we started. While the song stays the same, Marie has definitely changed throughout the course of the staging. So it gets a build in the staging, but not in the song. Alright, we're gonna keep skipping forward and we're gonna hit all of the zeros and all of the fives, because they really stand out, at least to me. 2005 is Helena Paparizou with My Number One, and this one is fascinating, because again, the first chorus sounds exactly the same as the last chorus. And again, it's not to say that the entire song is stable throughout the entire way. Of course, the verses sound different than the chorus, you've got a bridge, there are different elements, there are different contrasts, but the energy level that we establish at the beginning is the energy level that we finish the song with. And while you might look at the staging and think, well, at the beginning it's Helena and 4 dancers, and at the end it's Helena and 4 dancers, I think you'd be missing something really interesting in the choreography. Go back, watch that performance again. In fact, watch all of these performances again. They're brilliant. They won Eurovision for a reason. And here's what you'll see with My Number One. When they start, all 5 of our dancers are in sync, and that's great, it looks fantastic. Then, around the chorus, the end of the chorus, the 4 dancers start to move in sync, but they're doing moves separate from Helena. They're making her stand out. They're making her the focus of the performance. As the show keeps going, we then get these really standout visual moments. One where Helena's lifted up into the air and she plays a giant improvised string instrument using her dancers. And another where they all fall down and form a giant number one on the floor behind her. I don't know if you'd have to call it cheesy, but it's definitely visually memorable and very different from where we started, with everyone doing the same stuff on the same stage. For that reason, My Number One tells a really interesting story over the course of the song, while sonically it sounds the same throughout. From there we go to Lordi, which is almost the exact same thing. It has a bit less of a build. In fact, at least 2 points out of these 5 are purely due to the use of pyro. In fact, throughout this graph, a lot of these people are getting staging points for their pyro. You've got 5 monsters on stage playing their instruments at the beginning, there are 5 monsters at the end, there's just a whole lot more smoke in the air. And likewise, Hard Rock Hallelujah starts rocking out, and it ends rocking out, and we rock out the entire time. It's what makes it memorable, it's what makes it fun, it's definitely what made it stand out in 2006. Let's hop a few years later, let's talk 2009 and Alexander Rybak in Fairy Tale. There's definitely a different vibe. We have the use of the violin that changes throughout the performance. His voice also gets louder throughout. There is some change in the instrumentation, though not a whole lot, but the build and the staging is truly 5 out of 5. 2009 had a really huge stage, and I think Norway here used it incredibly well. We of course have Alexander playing his violin and singing. He does it at the start, he does it at the end, that stays constant. But we start with these folk dancers around him, and throughout the course of the stage show, those dancers are joined by 2 extra women singing backup and harmonies. That's a new vocal element as well as a new staging element that arrives. The folk dancers also start doing more and more complex choreography. They're kicking hats off of stands. At one point, there's a really impressive gymnastics routine across the front of the stage. We're going places. And then it ends with perhaps the single most tasteful use of pyrotechnics that's maybe ever been on that stage. It fires, it glitters, it's such a wonderful crescendo to this fairy tale world. From 1 singer and 3 guys on stage to a full set of 6, from very contained folk dancing to backflips and pyrotechnics going off, yeah, that's a hell of a build. This is Lena with Satellite. I just find that this song is very much a hangout. Lena's singing on her own, vibing out in the middle of the stage at the beginning of the song, she's there at the end. Her backup singers are at the back of the stage, they don't move, they're not doing anything really much throughout the song either. There's some movement with the camera that adds maybe a little bit of a build, but by and large, we start and end at the exact same place. This kind of song that we encounter a couple of times in this graph, I'm going to call a samer. When you create a world for 3 minutes on that stage and you invite us all into it to enjoy it, there's something quite calming, quite relaxing, quite vibey, and quite chill about these samer type songs. They tell us what they are what they are, we like what they are, everyone gets what they want. Contrast that with 2011 and Running Scared, got a different beast on our hands. Here, the song, start, end, the same, bridge is nice in there, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But the staging, also pretty good. We start with everyone in a line, we use some camera angles to make some hay out of that. We're very wide, we get to see the cavernous arena, and then there are moments where we're really close and intimate, and then of course there's the spectacular falling curtain of pyrotechnics behind the stage for that last chorus. Say what you will about the song, I know it's kind of a controversial winner for some people, but I think the staging is really nice and tasteful. This is one that you can watch with the sound off and still understand that we start somewhere and we finish somewhere else. From there, in 2014, we hit Conchita Wurst and Rise Like a Phoenix. This one is impressive, even if you didn't notice it. First of all, let's talk about the music. This is one of the greatest distances we travel. The beginning, we get that James Bond style instrumental flourish. Conchita begins very low, very contained, and by the end of that song, we are belting notes to the high heavens. We move a great distance sonically from the beginning to the end, even while it reads like a James Bond theme throughout. And that's the fact that the entire first minute of this act is one long, slow push-in from the very back of the stadium. And that's important, because Conchita Wurst is a drag queen. That long, slow push-in at the beginning allows us to hear Conchita before we see her. In fact, it's not really until the first chorus that she is lit well enough that we can see that this is a bearded drag queen. That means that you can buy into the song and at least think it's intriguing or interesting or something to consider before you see Conchita. Whereas if they had opened in a close-up, maybe there's some people that would have been put off by that and dismissed the song out of hand entirely. It's a very clever trick. As we get to the first chorus, we see her standing singing in that sea of fog, and small wings appear on the LED, which has been dark up until this point. The second chorus, those wings get bigger. There's a wind machine, it blows the fog off of stage, it's hitting Conchita's hair, it looks different. There's a new intensity on that stage. By the end of the song, those wings are triumphant, the color has changed, there is a huge, powerful blast of fire. It's just exquisite. So for that reason, Rise Like a Phoenix gets a 5 out of 5 on the staging build section of their performance. Let's bring up the graph, you know where we're going next. It's 2017 and Salvador Sobral singing Amor Pelos Dos. This was the point where I realized that even though there might be a recent trend, what I thought was not actually reality. Because the thing that made Amor Pelos Dos stand out in the year 2017 is exactly the fact that I've given it a 0 in staging and song build. Salvador stands on the small stage in the middle of the arena and sings one of the most beautiful songs that's ever been on that stage. It is personal, it is internal, he is moving how he feels motivated to move. You are watching something that seems so real and so exquisite and so personal and so well performed. If you're looking out, you can even see the image on the LED screen way in the back. It's just a forest. It doesn't change throughout the performance. Likewise, we begin with really beautiful instrumentation and his voice. By the end of the song, maybe there's an additional little flourish in there. There's definitely an emotional crescendo to the way he's singing, but we're not really at a different volume level. We're not really in a different key. There's no extra instruments that have come in. This is the perfect example of a song that is just a blissful vibe check. And 2017 was a really chaotic year. I feel like people forget that. You had Occidentali's Karma, you had Romania doing Yodel It, like there were a lot of people going maximalist on that stage that year, and Portugal was very still and serene and beautiful in a year of people just doing too much. From there we go to 2021, and now we're in what I would consider the modern phase of the Eurovision Song Contest. And as you can clearly see, the build in both staging and song are all incredibly higher from where we started, way back in 2000. 2021 is an interesting year as well because it's the year after COVID. And because of that, the Eurovision Song Contest in Rotterdam was one of the first concerts I saw actually taking place after COVID. Lockdowns here in Canada lasted a lot longer than they maybe did in other places of the world. And that meant that sitting at home and watching a stadium full of people celebrate together was just euphoric. You really feel that when you go back and watch 2021. Just how excited and joyful everyone is to even be on that stage. Therein lies the reason why I think Måneskin won 2021. Because they're doing a rock concert. The staging is incredible. It begins with the stage doors opening and Damiano beckoning us onto the stage with him to join him on stage for this rock show. He takes us around the front where we get to see the crowd and we start rocking out. Throughout the verse and the chorus, things are building within the verse as well. Like the complexity, the amount of words per minute, the rhyming, the rhythm, they all progress throughout the song. By the time we hit the second verse, he's got an exceptional flow at a much higher speed than what we saw at the beginning. Likewise with the staging, while we're with him, he takes us and we dance with each member of the band in turn. We change from this gray color scheme to a red color scheme. By that final chorus, pyro's going off all over the stage, the lights are going nuts, the crowd is so hyped up, he's expressing more emotion to the point where he falls on the ground at the very end. Like we have come so far from this welcoming moment to this explosive pyrotechnic finale. And there were other songs that were huge, but nothing felt more like a stadium full of people rocking out and having a great time than Italy in 2021. And I think that's why the build was so successful in winning at the contest. Now, let's have an interesting little chat about 2023 and Loreen. In every single way that I could categorize a build, Tattoo does the most. Think of the staging. We begin with the letterboxed bars in incredibly tight on Loreen. We see her laying down on this stone obelisk, something like that, and it's also off on an angle. We move in over the course of the song, the bars come away, we see more and more and more of her throughout the performance. Then, as the song progresses, the pillars get larger, they start animating, she sits up, then she's standing, then she's interacting with the roof, and it finally flies off into the distance. The sandstorm behind her that started at the beginning of the song is now a full raging wall. It's just so different visually at the end from where we began. And that includes, of course, a moment about 2/3 of the way through where we hit this breakdown, this quieter moment. The first half of the song has such an incredible build that you actually need that little breath before you push it even higher to blow the roof off the building at the end. It begins with that wonderful little synth trill and the sound of Loreen breathing. The song begins quite low in her register, her voice is quiet, it's contained, and by the end of the song, not only have we moved from a low chest voice to a full-throated expression of everything that Loreen's feeling, we've also moved from low notes to high notes, we've moved from a quiet introspection to her raging against an entire hurricane. The dynamic range in Tattoo is just incredible. And I want you to consider this. In 2023, the Eurovision Song Contest came down to a two-horse race. It was Loreen and it was Korea with Cha Cha Cha. Let's consider the build in Cha Cha Cha. It starts incredibly intense. The synths are heavy and industrial. His voice is growly, almost a rap-like way of singing. It's very intense, it feels dangerous, it feels lethal, it feels a little unhinged and off-kilter. That intensity then jumps up when we get to the section with the cha-cha-chas. There's a more blast of instrumentation. There's heavier compression on things. We've gone from threatening to dangerous, and it's really exciting. But then halfway through the song, there's a moment where everything changes. We come out of that aggression into this world of rainbow light. Even the choreography at the beginning of the song is very sharp and it's very violent. He's punching out different sections of that wooden box. And then by the end, they're all kind of dancing together and moving as one. If you think about it, it's kind of a reverse build. We start way more intense than we end. I'm not saying that's why he didn't win, I just think it's a really interesting point to hold up two of these songs and look at how they're different in this particular way. And by the way, it's not a value judgment on either of them. They're both fantastic songs. They're both incredible pieces of art. I love Cha Cha Cha, but I just think when it comes to the build, Loreen edged him out by a margin. 2024, then we get Nemo with The Code, and this is another song that builds incredibly. You think about vocally and sonically at the beginning with the uh-oh and the little plucking of the stringed instruments to that end, that final chorus where he is spinning around on the giant top, absolutely belting his heart out. What started as plucked strings was joined by drum and bass, and now there's a horn section, there's a string section, it's like there's a full orchestra. We're way more intense than where we started. And likewise with the staging, when he begins, the lighting rigs are low. He says, "Welcome to the show, let everybody know." Again, we've got a moment beckoning you in, and we're seeing almost behind the scenes. He is bringing us into his world. Then one by one, different elements of the stage activate. You have an increasing line of lights that light up. Then you have his use of that weird top gyroscope platform thing, which by the way is brilliant. They use every drop of juice they can squeeze out of that thing. Whether it's to help launch him up into the air, whether it's to fall or spin or move, it's just so dynamic from that really intimate beginning to this absolutely epic end. Even the back LED screen starts spinning and showing that brilliant halo at the very end. And likewise, in 2024, Nemo was up against another fan favorite, and that was Baby Lasagna doing Rim Tim Tagadim. And just like Loreen and Korea, I think there's a really interesting point of comparison between these runner-up and second place in 2024. Because Baby Lasagna also had a phenomenal song. It's another rock song, but it also starts rocking out kind of the same way it ends rocking out. Which is to say, the song almost feels like it's a train on a track. Like it has such momentum and such vigor and such energy that is unrelenting. And that's kind of the point of the song, right? Is to be this unrelenting force. It's not to say there's no variation within that. We of course get the moment where everyone's doing the fun little dance with their bracelets. It looks incredible. Visually, it's spectacular. But it establishes an intensity at the beginning of the song that it carries throughout the entire song. They change the colors in the backgrounds of the LEDs. We move from one color at a time to something rainbow and multicolor. Another interesting rainbow element from a runner-up. And I just feel like it has less room between its high and low points than The Code does. Again, not a value judgment, both great songs, both deserved winners, but only one of them got the points to come out on top. And finally, let's talk about JJ in 2025. This, I feel, almost takes the cake from Loreen. It's really close, guys. Here's something interesting about Wasted Love. The entire performance takes place in a square aspect ratio. They kind of move the framing in so that it's more like a box. And it's in black and white. That stays constant throughout the entire presentation. But what we're seeing, the narrative that we get from the stage show, is one of the most incredible uses of visual storytelling I think I've seen on the Eurovision stage. We begin almost in the darkness, finding JJ wrapped in a blanket, singing quiet, singing to himself, "I'm an ocean of love and you're scared of water." The little paper boat comes down, it floats away. We see that JJ himself is actually on a boat. The mast raises up, and what we thought was boxes and detritus around him is actually a ship that he's on. And we see that we're out at sea. In the distance, there's a little bit of a storm, lightning flashing, a storm on its way. In the corner, we also get these really magnificent god rays that are the stage lights, just in black and white. It's exquisite. He hangs up his lantern, a source of light that is very important to the narrative of the staging. The wind starts to blow, he starts to fight a little against it, and we see the storm slowly approach. The waves are getting bigger, the wind is coming in, we're beginning to lose JJ, he's about to get overwhelmed. And now his voice is so high, it's reaching, it's operatic. We're way different from that quiet moment we had at the beginning. And then of course, at the last 30 seconds of the performance comes the storm, where everything is breaking down around him. There's flashes of strobe lights from the lightning, the floor has become a vortex, he lays down and surrenders himself to this storm. We're getting tossed around with the camera, there's particles flying through the air. His vocal has been broken down into almost an electronic instrument. There is thrashing about. There's so much instrumentation that is breaking down and glitching out. Everything is going haywire. We see the lighthouses emerge, and then at the very end there is this moment where from the crescendo, from the storm, it has passed. The beam of light sweeps across the stage, and we see that everything is calm. JJ has survived, he has protected himself, he will be just fine. You may not have liked it as the winner at the time, but go back and watch that performance. I think the storytelling is exceptional. And now we're all caught up to the present day. Here's a little thing I did. I overlaid some trend lines over this graph just so we could see how things were trending over the last 25 years. And as you can tell, our staging started maybe more intense than our vocal build, but over time, vocal is definitely overtaken. The style of song that wins Eurovision now tends to be incredibly dramatic. We just go on journeys with these songs. And with the more advanced staging, the more advanced filmmaking techniques that are available to the contest, everything has become more expensive, more complicated, and I think that really favors songs that have these stories to tell, that are built into the sonic structure of the song, as well as these really expressive staging moments. So with that said, let's take a look at some of the songs for 2026 and see if we can't find anything interesting about them. Now, I have no insider information. By the time I edit this video, it's probably going to be wildly out of date. But I will say this, of the top 6-ish songs that are favored to win the competition, 5 of them have really big builds. But there's one that doesn't. Let's talk about that one first. Furto is a fantastic song, but I don't think it quite has a build. If I referred to songs that don't have builds earlier in this video as samers, songs that really sit in one vibe for 3 minutes, Furto is almost a changer, in that its verse, its chorus, its breakdown, its musicality, all of these elements keep switching up throughout the song in really interesting ways. But I don't necessarily feel there's that much difference in intensity between the beginning and the end. Definitely is a little bit with the instrumentation that's used, but by and large, that vibe that we have at the beginning is kind of similar to the vibe of that final chorus. Importantly, there's a really emotional breakdown 2/3 the way through, where he's singing about his mother, his vocal style changes, it's a lot more expressive emotionally, and then we're right back to where we started, and that's kind of the point of the song. The structure tells the story of the song, and I think that's really interesting. And it's definitely something that sets Furto apart from the other 5 entries that I think are really solid sonic builds. Let's talk about those next. Let's start with the 3 whose staging we kind of know. Denmark has a brilliant build. Staging-wise, he's in front of a box, he's beside a box, he's on top of a box, he's in a box, he's back out front of the box. We change from a blue color story to a red color story by the end. The choreography that was very fluid at the beginning is now sharp and hard-hitting. Vocally, he begins in a very sultry musical place and then has these moments of propulsion. It's really interesting. It's got a really nice build from the start and from the end. And if the staging on the Eurovision stage is at all like DMGP, then I think it's got a really strong chance to get a lot of votes from the people that like these sorts of songs that build. Finland is almost exactly the same. It's got great visual storytelling. Our 2 artists are separated through this window, through this confessional. There's yearning, there's elements of fire that start early that then become like fire raining from the sky. We run around and then we see that there's a giant anguish call at the very end. And then that final huge note, you know, that they start down low, they go really high, it explodes and goes out all at once and the stage is left smoking. Like, 5 out of 5 for a staging build, 5 out of 5 for a sonic build. We're never really quiet at any moment in Finland, but I still think we've traveled a long way for the end from where we started. Sweden, likewise, is telling a really fantastic story through the staging. The way those lasers come in, the way that they change from red to blue towards the end, the way that the back projection, which has been glitching out and red, suddenly becomes this gigantic projection of Felicia, the way that her mouth was covered and you could see her her eyes, and then at the end her eyes are covered and you can see her mouth. We've changed. We've changed quite a lot throughout the song. Sonically as well, this definitely ends in a very different part from where it starts. I would say it leaps really quick from a low to high intensity with that first chorus when you realize just how heavy hitting the EDM is going to be. And then we kind of do that a couple of times of going from quieter verses to that incredibly hard hitting musicality in the chorus. There's two other songs that to me seem to be floating around the top of people's charts, and let's start with France, Monroe with Regard. This starts with such a huge operatic string moment. It's very intense, it's very flourishing, and then almost immediately we drop down to those first few lines of her song. Then we leap into operatic moments. We come back down, we go up, we're back doing the sh again. We have these huge opera notes that kind of like soar over the top of the song. It's really interesting. We don't have an idea of staging yet, and goodness knows, good staging can really put a song over the edge. Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, they could also change things up. We don't know, we haven't seen the rehearsals yet when I'm recording this. So there's still an unknown, there's still a chance for the staging in Regard to really wow us and perhaps tell more of a smooth build in the story, where the build in the song tends to be a little up and down, kind of like Sweden. Which brings us to the last song I'm going to talk about in this video, which is Australia. I think if you want a textbook example of a buttery, smooth sonic build from the very beginning to the very end, Australia might be a bit of a dark horse this year. Those first two bars, at the beginning you get the harp and it's plucked, and then you have the run in the second bar that is the played violin. Between bar 1 and bar 2, we have gone up and then we've gone down. We have plucked notes and then we have smooth notes. And then we also have something that is regular to a beat and then something that moves faster as it comes back down. Those first two bars promise you that we are going somewhere. It's fascinating. And then the entire song proceeds to do just that. We begin with delta low, it takes a line or two before she hits that "it won't be long," which slides so beautifully, it opens up the vocal, and then we get to the first chorus. What was small and personal is now very loud, very proud. Towards the end of that chorus, the beat kicks in. Oh, this isn't quite the song we thought it was. It's gonna be a little more tempo, a little more energy here than you were expecting. That continues through the second verse and the second chorus, then we get to that incredible breakdown. The piano is a great moment, almost like a Loreen breather, where we shift sideways into something that is sonically very different and very interesting. Then we get the hey moment, where we know that something's about to go down, and then finally, that last chorus in halftime, the drums have come in, those background vocals are at full force, and we end with one final vocal moment where she is like reaching up, letting everything release that she's been building throughout the song. I'm a huge fan. I am Australian. This is the Bias channel. Feel free to disagree with me. That's why God invented the comments section. So what can we conclude from this little exploration of the build of Eurovision songs? Something that I really strongly believe is that there is no correct way or incorrect way to do this. What your song is doing is definitely a huge part of the package, but something else that also sets you apart is what everyone else is doing. It pays to stand out. It pays to be doing something different. There are songs that absolutely won because they are still and serene and beautiful. There are songs that have won because their staging told an incredible story that helps reinforce the message of their song. For 2026, it's really too early to tell. We don't even know if one of those 6 favorites is going to win the competition. We'll have to wait and find out, and I'm really excited to see. I think looking at the last 25 winners of the Eurovision Song Contest really has shown that for songs to stand out in the current moment, they really need to be using their builds smartly, strategically, and in a way that nobody else is doing around them. Could that cause problems for some entries in 2026? Your guess is as good as mine. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm almost certain I left out something really important. I'm almost certain that you disagree with me about the different levels in these different songs. I want to say again, this is really non-scientific. It was just my opinion giving these scores out of 5. Brilliant songs can have no build, terrible songs can have a whole lot of build, but it's fascinating seeing the change just in the winning entries over time. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. What do you think? Will the winner of Eurovision 2026 have a phenomenal build like we've seen for the last 3 3 or 4 years? Or are we in for another Salvador Sobral? I can't wait to find out. Be sure to like and subscribe for this still very young channel, and I'll see you on the next video.